Episode 21, Over a Barrel. This episode starts with the main six on a train going to visit a relative of Applejack's. This episode has a western theme, which I find really enjoyable. I question why a group of stallions need to pull what is clearly a steam train, but for all I know, they're out of coal. Either way, I hope they're properly compensated. We then cut to the carriage at the very back, where we see that Applejack is reading a bedtime story to a tree. She's planning to give the tree as a gift to her relatives, in a place called Appaloosa. This annoys Rarity, as they all have to share a carriage, while the tree gets one to itself. Trees have feelings too, Rarity. Applejack confesses that they need to do this because replanting a tree somewhere else can be upsetting for them. I'm just going to believe that because Applejack clearly knows a lot more about apple trees than I do. This just annoys Rarity further, especially considering Applejack treats the tree like it's her baby. I'm Count Lurchlot, and this is Lukewarm Television. Later that night, the main characters are having fun talking in their carriage, but then Spike tries to break it up, as he was up early roasting snacks for them, and he's tired. However, then Rainbow Dash points out that a few of the kernels haven't popped, and Spike decides to be petty by incinerating them. Twilight then thinks maybe it is time to go to sleep, but most of the main characters keep having a conversation by candlelight, and they're not exactly being silent with their whispering. Spike quickly loses his temper and decides to go sleep with the tree. They laugh this off by calling him Huffy the Magic Dragon. Then Rarity loses her temper and they all go to bed, as they are horrified by her temper and her appearance. Normally I wouldn't be on Rarity's side, but I constantly got kept up by people at uni when I was trying to sleep, so I can understand her annoyance. The next morning, the main characters are awoken by a buffalo stampede. It doesn't seem too bad at first, but then they start ramming the train carriages. Meanwhile, Spike is somehow sleeping through all of this. Is it wrong that I feel more concerned about the stallions and whether or not they've gotten a break? Speaking of the stallions, the buffalo start ramming them. I don't care what you do to the train, but leave the stallions alone. They work very hard. Eventually, a few buffalo jump on top of each other, allowing a smaller one to jump onto the train's roof. Rainbow Dash follows the smaller buffalo. Unfortunately, every time she tries to talk, the buffalo runs past her and even jumps over her at one point. The chase ends in a Looney Tune-like fashion, with Rainbow Dash hitting a sign with her face. Then the buffalo steal the back carriage, includes Spike, who has only just woken up. They then arrive at Appaloosa, and I can't emphasize this enough, I really hope those stallions are paid well. They run into Applejack's relative Brayburn. Like the other Apple relatives we've seen, he's very friendly, to the point that he is more interested in showing everyone around town than hearing from Applejack that they have a problem. Also, I really like the look they gave this town, as it adds to the western theme. This is a town that settler ponies have built over the last year. This does lead me to an odd question I have about this universe, because they have horse-drawn carriages. Why would they need these? I mean, it would be just as quick to walk. At least they are fair in the sense that they take turns pulling. Applejack tries to explain the situation, but Brayburn just keeps showing them the sights. The last place he shows them is the pride of Appaloosa, the apple orchard. Applejack is finally able to speak, and tells Brayburn how the buffalo stole the carriage with the apple tree, Spike is missing, Rainbow Dash went after them, and they can't find Pinkie Pie. Turns out, Brayburn is all too familiar with the buffalo. Apparently, the buffalo don't want any more trees added in and want the settler ponies to remove the ones they've planted. Brayburn doesn't know why the buffalo want this, but the ponies refuse to remove them, because they worked hard on planting those trees and they use them to feed their families. I'm not familiar with American history, but I'm guessing this is a reference to the conflict between American settlers and the Native Americans. Again, not greatly familiar with American history, but that's the impression I get. Something tells me though the conflict is a lot more censored than it was in real life. We then see Rainbow Dash on her quest to find Spike, at which point she runs into Pinkie Pie, who is also searching for Spike. Unfortunately, Pinkie's loud talking angers Rainbow Dash, who yells loud enough that the buffalo surround them. The buffalo are about to charge, but thankfully Spike is with them and vouches for the ponies. Also, Spike has become good friends with the buffalo since we last saw him. The buffalo actually seemed pretty chill. Later on, we discover the buffalo took Spike by accident, which they feel bad about, and they respect dragons, so they treat Spike like an honored guest. They still don't like ponies very much, and only tolerate Pinkie and Rainbow because they're around Spike. They then run into the smaller buffalo from before, who's named Little Strongheart. Understandably, Rainbow Dash isn't too thrilled to see her. This makes Rainbow Dash want to leave, but Little Strongheart steps in front to explain the buffalo's point of view on the orchard. They consider it selfish because with trees all over the land, they can no longer run through their traditional stampeding grounds. This leads them to meeting the Chief Thunderhooves, who explains the situation in more detail. They have a long stampeding trail that they have run through for many generations. It is a sacred tradition to run the path every year. The settler ponies have now planted trees all over the land without their permission, preventing them from practicing their traditions. They've asked the ponies to move the trees, but they refuse. Initially, Rainbow Dash appears to have no sympathy, but this story has convinced her they need to talk to the Appaloosans. This is actually an interesting moment for me, because being loyal to a fault, you'd think Rainbow Dash would only want to help the ponies, but I think this shows that she respects the buffalo's traditions and their loyalties to them. meaning that while she is loyal to her friends and ponies, she's also willing to help others in their loyal endeavors of their traditions. The others are about to head out to find them, but they immediately run into Pinkie Pie, Rainbow Dash, and Spike. It's at this point they reveal they promised the buffalo a chance to talk. Little Strongheart is the buffalo who has come to talk to them about having the Appaloosans move the trees. Brayburn is willing to listen, but then Applejack interjects, saying Brayburn only wants to talk about why the trees should stay. Rainbow Dash points out that the buffalo had the land first, so by right, it is theirs. Applejack points out that they can't plant the trees anywhere else, as it's the only flat land and they need to feed their families. Interestingly enough, neither Little Strongheart nor Brayburn actually get to talk during this bit when they're supposed to be the negotiators. Thankfully, Twilight breaks it up by recognizing that both the buffalo and the ponies have good reasons to use the land. Pinkie then has an idea. They gather the buffalo and ponies to the town square, where we get another Pinkie Pie musical number. And keeping with the Western theme, it's a ragtime song with Pinkie dressed up as a saloon dancer. The basic message is that the buffalo and ponies aren't that different, and she thinks that the best thing for them to do is to share and care about the land, as it's the right thing to do. Most of the crowd just looks confused by Pinkie's performance. This does thankfully lead the sheriff and the chief to an agreement, but the agreement is that they think that was the worst performance ever. Poor Pinkie's heartbroken by this. The Buffalo Chief declares that they will be doing their stampede at high noon the next day, another Western reference, and that if the orchard is still there, they will flatten it along with the whole town. The sheriff counters, saying that they should bring their best as they will be ready for them. Little Strongheart and Brayburn try to interject, but their pleas fall on deaf ears. The two sides leave, and Pinkie is disappointed that neither of them understood the message of her song. While I understood and appreciated it, Pinkie, maybe portray your message in a more understandable way next time. The town is in panic as they wait for the buffalo. The main characters try to reason with the ponies, but they refuse to listen. What's good about this episode is that it really makes you think. The buffalo are the traditional owners of the land, and that should allow them to run the path as they've always done. I can understand also why the ponies want to use the land, because it is to feed their families. That being said, I support the buffalo more as they had the land first. During this time, the ponies harvest the apples, create barriers around the town, and make apple pies for ammunition. Meanwhile, the buffalo train for the upcoming stampede. Spike asks if there's any way they can stop this, but Little Strongheart says, unless they remove the trees, she doesn't think so. Rainbow Dash talks to the chief, but he points out that they've taken their land. What are they supposed to do? Rainbow argues that it's never too late to find a solution, but the chief declares that at high noon it will be too late. The buffalo get prepared to charge the barricaded town. At first it appears the buffalo can't bring themselves to destroy a whole town, but then Pinkie does her song number again, which annoys them apparently. The chief must really hate that song if it's enough to send him into a ballistic rage. The buffalo charge and easily break the barricades. This doesn't deter the ponies, however, as they immediately fire back with apple pies. Surprisingly enough, this does manage to keep the buffalo at bay. We also get another Looney Tune-like scene with a buffalo running into an anvil. Nevertheless, the buffalo starts successfully destroying the town. The buffalo chief charges a defenseless sheriff who appears to resign himself to death. Thankfully, however, a pie hits the chief just before he hits the sheriff. If this wasn't a kid's show, something tells me that would have been a lot more violent. With the chief down, the battle is paused. A piece of pie then drops onto the chief's tongue. The chief loves the pie, which gives him a better idea. We then see the ponies cutting down a path within the orchard, allowing the buffalo to stampede through. The chief will allow them to keep the orchard in exchange for a share of the fruit, along with a few apple pies. Although it's not said, I'm guessing this also helps the ponies because the stampeding helps with the harvest. Either way, the ponies and buffalo are satisfied and the buffalo stampede into the sunset. Twilight then gives the message for the episode, but I'm not going to repeat it because it is literally just a rehash of Pinkie's message from before, which Pinkie points out during an angry fourth wall break. To be fair though, Twilight's version was a bit easier to understand. I think this was a very good episode for the following reasons. Not only did it make reference to real life historical events, but it also makes you think because you don't really want to take a side in this confrontation. Both sides have genuinely good reasons for why they need the land. Like I said though, I side with the buffalo more because they were the owners first. That being said, I am glad they came to a compromise. I think episodes like this are why this show was a big success. Thanks for watching, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you at the next review.